We now go to the gentleman from California for his 5 minutes, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In our state of California, we have a governor who routinely attacks judges when he doesn't get his way, often in very harsh terms. This being Governor Newsom, of course. After one ruling related to the Second Amendment, Newsom threw a veritable temper tantrum, calling a special press conference to lambast the judge, calling him an extremist, a stone-cold ideologue, a wholly funded subsidiary of the NRA, and saying, quote, "We need to call this federal judge out. He will continue to do damage, mark my words." So it is curious hearing some of the comments about the appropriate relationship between the branches, different branches of our government, and the appropriate way to opine on judicial opinions with that in view. And we've also, of course, seen examples brought up by Chairman Jordan related to Chuck Schumer's comments on the steps of the Supreme Court that were rebuked by Chief Justice Roberts himself. So there certainly is, I think it's appropriate as elected officials for us to express views on opinions of the judiciary, but the idea that one side has crossed a line but the other has not simply is not borne by the evidence. Now, the broader question before us today, I think, is related to this issue of checks and balances, because I think we've reached a point where checks and balances have gotten a bit out of whack, given developments that were not really on the minds of the founders related to the idea of nationwide injunctions, which didn't exist in the early years of the Republic, or really not until modern times, and given the expansive growth of the federal judiciary, such that now you have not just an issue of the judiciary impeding the president or impeding Congress, but rather you have the ability of any individual judge to do so. As Justice Gorsuch has said, the government's hope of implementing any new policy could face the long odds of a straight sweep, parlaying a 94-0 win in the district courts into a 12-0 victory in the courts of appeal. So what these nationwide injunctions have effectively done is not just shifted power from one branch to another, but empowered the most extreme people within the judicial branch by saying that we're going to give one judge who can be essentially picked by the plaintiffs the ability to put a policy on hold. And what this creates is a sense of stasis, and I think a sense of frustration. And you see this during Republican and presidential administrations, that the levers that we have to really have our citizenry exercise its will are getting increasingly difficult to pull. You know, we have increasing hurdles to legislation, the ability to get over a filibuster in the Senate to change policy that way. And then even when the president is exercising his duly granted authority, we have these nationwide injunctions that are putting the president's agenda into stasis. And so I do think there is an appropriate opportunity here to see if we need to recalibrate the way checks and balances are functioning. And I think that on top of that, it's a matter for the judiciary itself, because the way our system generally works is you have different forums, you have different cases addressing similar issues involving different fact patterns, you develop a factual record, you have different judges that provide a different sort of analysis, and then to the extent that they conflict, it percolates up the system. You have that record in place, and you can then come to a decision that has the most fully considered process, that within our system. And these nationwide injunctions are short-circuiting that entire process, not allowing for the merits of an issue to be duly considered, and simply giving one particular judge, often on the extreme end of the distribution, full say on the matter. So, Mr. Gingrich, Speaker Gingrich, you've mentioned a few possible remedies here. One that caught my attention was the ability of the Chief Justice to establish a procedure as it concerns nationwide injunctions. What would that look like?
Well, thank you, Rush. Look, it would be the least intrusive and least disruptive to have the Chief Justice decide, and the court decide. It would be very simple. Yes, a district judge can render a judgment, but the moment he or she renders an injunction beyond their district, the Supreme Court would immediately intervene, suspend imposition of the remedy until the Supreme Court rendered a decision. If the Supreme Court said, you're right, then you have a Supreme Court enforced nationwide injunction. But if the Supreme Court said, you know, we're not convinced, then it would vitiate the whole thing and it would be over. And you would not have the ability of individual district judges to make radical decisions. Remember, justice delayed is justice denied. You start having, you have, and this is where the judge, frankly, the Chief Justice was, I think, a little bit silly, to say, well, there's an appeals process. If you're talking about getting rid of criminals, or you're talking about defending the country, an appeals process can run so long that the damage has already been done by the time you go through the appeal. And so I think in some form, if we're going to retain the ability of district judges to issue any injunction, it has to be modified. If we can't get a modification, it has to be abolished.
Thank you very much, and I would encourage the Chief Justice to hopefully be thinking about this from his perspective. And in Congress, we of course also have tools to create expedited appeals, and I think that frankly, that's hopefully perhaps a compromise that both sides could come to, since this will be an issue that arises in future administrations as well.
I thank the gentleman. I now ask unanimous consent that Ms. Crockett be permitted to participate in today's hearing for